sudden the students are starting to bring out drawings and models. This afternoon we'll be seeing a lot more models and process drawings. And I've got big shoulders. I can take it. I didn't make them do more models, etc. Anyway, Antoinette is going to take us to Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, and better project.
Hello everyone, my name is Antoinette Black. I'd first like to start off by thanking my thesis committee, Professor Brittany Williams, Professor Emeritus Carl DeQuay, and Professor Madeline Simon. I'd also like to thank my thesis cohort for their tremendous amount of encouragement throughout this process. This thesis is Crafting a Unity, Challenging a Culture of Conflict. We will journey through the process of this thesis to understand the problem, the need for a new building type, guidelines for site and program selection of this universal application, where this first case study will be implemented, and then how this problem will be addressed architecturally. We will then go through the design, and then I'll open it up for questions. Let's first take a look at our country's current state of conflict. We are seeing high numbers of police brutality, particularly on Black and brown bodies. We are conflicted and divided by the election of our current administration. Ultimately, we are in a culture of conflict. These are symptoms of both redlining and white flight, which left us with a lack of exposure to one another. This lack of exposure has solidified into the creation of stereotypes. And so this thesis architecturally addresses these issues by creating a new building type that is twofold. It creates healthy relationships between the community and the police, as well as expose different racial and socioeconomic groups to one another. Because these issues happen in many cities across the United States, this thesis presents guiding principles for site selection of this universal application. So this site should have a conglomerate of different people from different racial backgrounds and different socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as this site should lie on a divider and act as a unifier. The test site is adjacent to an emblem of integration. The Divine Lorraine was the first integrated hotel in the United States and is a hub of activism. The Divine Lorraine also at one point acted as a homeless shelter at one point. The Divine Lorraine dwells within Philadelphia. Philadelphia is one of the northern cities that has suffered from racial tension and redlining, as well as one of the major north cities that has received an influx of African Americans during the Great Migration. And so the site lays about 5 or 6 blocks from Center City, away from William Penn's original plan of Philadelphia. There are many resources around the site, such as many schools within the vicinity, as well as 2 police stations within about a 10 or 15 minute walk from the site. And so this site lays at the nexus of 3 main arterial streets: North Broad Street running north-south, Fairmount Avenue running east-west, and Ridge Avenue running diagonally. And so these arterial streets have different characters, and I'll go through these different characters. So North Broad Street, or Broad Street, is the corridor to Philadelphia running north-south. Particularly North Broad Street is it's a historic corridor, and it is somewhat of a civic enclave. So this Salvation Army is directly adjacent from the site, as well as another nonprofit organization, People for People.
Point on the plan where these are.
So this is the Salvation Army building, and this is the People for People organization.
Where are those on your plan, just so I know where?
Salvation Army is actually this building, which is cut off, and People for People is on this block up. And so Fairmount Avenue has they're very different character from North Broad Street in that it's very affluent, and it has different cultural institutions such as the Eastern State Penitentiary. Fairmount Avenue is very different from North Broad Street in that it's very refined. There are tree-lined streets and newer row home buildings as opposed to the masonry, like older historic buildings of North Broad Street. And Bridge Avenue is the most unique in character of the arterial streets. The area northwest of Broad Street is under rapid development. There are many plots that are being developed. And the area southeast of North Broad Street is full of dilapidated buildings. So it's not uncommon to see hyper-modern buildings adjacent to these dilapidated buildings. And so this is almost symbolic of the neighborhood in general. It's different people, different races, different perceptions within this site. And as you can see, the site lays at the nexus of these streets, and so this site will act as a catalyst for this positive interaction. So in order to foster interaction between the community and police, this thesis presents guiding principles for program selection within this universal application. So the program component should contain police outposts. It should have diversity of program in order to address the diversity of users. And it should also leverage existing community resources. So this program contains a police outpost component. The police outpost component allows members of the community to receive civic services in an environment that they may deem their own. In addition to the police outpost component, this program takes cues from the existing resources within the site. So for instance, the organization People for People that I spoke of before, they actually have a K through 12 program that focuses on entrepreneurship. And so this program extends that idea of entrepreneurship, creating somewhat of a enclave or hub for both education and entrepreneurship. The program includes a media center that allows for kids and young adults to receive financial literacy classes, adult education classes, coding classes, as well as computer classes for seniors. This entrepreneurship component is then extended into maker spaces in which people may make and sell items within the same building. And then again, building off of this idea of entrepreneurship, co-working spaces are integrated into the program in order to bring young professionals within the building, but also allow people within the building to not only learn skills of entrepreneurship, but also practice them within the same building. Art classes, recreation classes are then tied into the program to bring a diversity of users, as well as CPR classes and self-defense classes taught by police officers also synthesize the police involvement into the building as well. Public spaces such as the Co-op Cafe, as well as the flexible open auditorium, allow for the community to feel welcome within the building. Also, a program is scheduled so that different users may interact with one another on a daily basis. So taking these ideas of integration and transparency, I'll then take you through the design and show how these ideas are implemented. So the test site lays across the street from the Divine Lorraine, and therefore it takes cues from its form. Similar to the German philosopher Heidegger's idea of Raum, which is carving out space in order to make place, the form carves out a front yard for the Divine Lorraine, honoring it as a beacon within the community. It then creates a juxtaposed vertical form that creates a symbiotic relationship between the two buildings, as well as densifies the site. A sunken plaza is then carved out to allow for rallies and informal lectures to happen. This idea of carving out space is then taken into the interior to create an atrium that faces that front yard of the Divine Lorraine, as well as mirrors that exterior plaza. And so we can see these ideas of carving out space take form into the interior of the building. The central atrium acts as a central organizer of space within the building. It is an extension of the exterior plaza. And then it makes its way through the building, creating staggered floor plates that somewhat create a visual connection throughout the building, as well as create somewhat of a microcosm of the city within the building. So you have eyes on the street. The atrium also creates programmatic adjacency so that different room types with different programs may lie next to one another so that this interaction between different groups of people, again, happens throughout the day. I'll now take you through an architectural sequence in which we'll see how these ideas take form within the building. So this is the view from North Broad Street. The central organizing feature of the atrium is shown on the exterior. The enclosure is made up of terracotta and glass. And so the terracotta pays homage to that masonry corridor of North Broad Street. However, it is vertically oriented and emphasized, and these panels intersect one another in order to show somewhat of a symbol of the interaction that's happening on the inside. And so the sunken plaza acts as a place of gathering, but it also creates an inside-outside connection between the building. You can view what's happening on the inside of the building from the outside, and also sunken plaza is connected to the metro, so therefore people that are coming out from the metro can walk into this plaza and then see this interaction take place. So therefore it makes this building more public. Upon entering the building, one may view the gathering stairs or stadium seating that someone acts as the piazza of the building. You can also see these columns that are neutral and frame space that also blur the idea of threshold throughout the building. Again, we can see these ideas of columns framing space, and you can see these columns move from the inside to the outside of the loggia. And again, we can see that view of the inside-outside connection and just understand the visibility and transparency of the building. The cop kiosk is placed underneath the stadium seating and allows for viewers to feel welcome to address police officers, and it is visible from the ground floor so that the people of the community may see this interaction take place. And the central atrium, you can see throughout the building, it really creates this visual connection, so you can see people working in the maker spaces, you can see people working in the classrooms, and really feel connected to the people within the building. Also, again, these classrooms, there's visibility, so you can see the interaction take place. Overall, you can see these ideas of transparency and overlap, and the ideas of inside and outside take place within the manifestation of the building. And so therefore, people may take the ideas of community building that they learn on the inside and carry that with them once they enter the city. So I will now open it up for discussion.
Great presentation. I really appreciate your taking us through this step by step and bringing not just your personal points of view, but also philosophy, like Heidegger, bringing in formal moves, the city. It hits on a lot of cylinders, so I appreciate that. I'm really happy that you talked about the metro. For a while there, I got, why did she lower that plaza? But then you said, oh, there's the metro, so we have people come out, so they have to go down there. But they basically need to come in and out of there, as opposed to it just being a sunken plaza, which I would be surprised if Carl let you do that. I would probably, and I think you got a lot going on. Can I just point out some things I just want to reiterate? I really like how you have this coming across as a pattern, and then this coming out, and there's a great deal of this sort of overlap. My only suggestion would be is that this building, which is receiving that, be much more articulated. I would almost put a gasket between this building and let this become almost something becomes a backdrop for the building. I don't know if you thought about that. Did you think about what the nature of this, not just the surface, not just the surface, but the idea of what this program is inside of that in terms of its connection across there?
So I knew from the beginning that I wanted this, more so the head tail, so the tail of the building to have a more public presence. So for instance, the co-op cafe and lounge are here so that people feel like they can enter the building and use this program and that is accessible to them. Also, I did a lot of studies thinking about how these two forms meet one another because this almost perfect square wants to complete itself. So I started studying putting a monumental stair there, started studying, I don't know, maybe a feature wall or something there, but I think I settled on just keeping that visual connection from, if you were standing here to see these columns move to the outside. I think that was more important to have that visual connection as opposed to having a stair or something block that almost sacred space.
Beautiful presentation, both visually and your oral presentation. I want to believe in this. I want to believe that people are really going to come here and populate the building. You've got a lot of rooms on every floor with some ideas about what the uses of those rooms would be. I love your atrium, that it's, you know, kind of got some movement in it. I'm wondering, where's the basketball court? Where's the indoor basketball court? Where's the outdoor basketball court? You know, these things that bring kids of all ages together, maybe bring the teens and the police force together to engage in an activity. So I think both in terms of activating the outdoor plaza space and believing more that there's a lot of activity going on in the building, that kind of use, kind of a more active activity could have really informed the project.
Just comment, I'm still kind of figuring out what's happening with this lower plaza and this inner plaza, and I'm questioning why they're not connected. They're visually connected, but you can't actually move between them.
So
What's the thought
this
process?
is actually a movable wall. So I show it in one of my renderings. I think it's this rendering where I'm actually showing someone move the panel so that if someone were to have a lecture, they would have privacy behind them. However, this movable wall can also open so that you not only have that visual transparency, but you could walk from this end straight into this interior piazza.
So can you move that glass?
You cannot move the glass.
So, okay. So that's, in my mind, not a good thing. I think you should have that glass be fully movable so you can connect this outdoor space and this indoor space. Sure, put a movable wall somewhere else, you know, there for that. But it's just a layer, it's a barrier that I don't understand. You've created this shape, you've created this bowl, and then you've put a visual connector. You put a barrier between them that's visually connecting them, but not physically connecting them. So I think there's exploration that needs to happen about that whole space, because you created a volume and it's spanning between a big square above and then open air. So I think that's just something that needs a little bit more thought through. And I agree with the comment before about the two volumes and a distinction between them. You can still have connection, visual connection, but there can still be two distinctions between them. It seems like your elevations are, to me, really undercooked. They seem very thin, and that, I can't tell, is that a brick? Is that brick panel?
It's terracotta panel.
Terracotta, you said terracotta, sorry. That just seems very applied and thin, and like, I don't understand at all the elevations or how those are articulated.
Seems like you could have maybe more levels of it, more levels of that terracotta kind of coming together and overlapping. We talked about wanting to kind of visually represent that integration. I wonder if you know, if some slip past each other and you were seeing more of those ends, or maybe if there were more of that kind of black spandrel panel, something to make the scale a little bit smaller. Those openings are so long and spidery.
Yeah, I think that's something.
With the glazing and how that's structured, that hasn't been explored.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you set up the dialogue between the hotel across the street and that sort of leg of the building, but then you've made it very glassy, so it's like it just sort of doesn't speak. I think it should have maybe been more solid to correspond to what's going on across the street. And is that your main entry?
So the main entry is coming from this loggia into this great space.
Okay. But then there's an entry down below also?
So there's an
Basement
entry.
level.
Yes, there is an entry at the basement level from the second plaza into the interior plaza.
So I think you need to pick one or the other, because just control and security, coming into this building, granted there are policemen inside and that, but I think you sort of make a decision. So if the idea is for people to come across and go down, down this plaza and then come in, maybe that's what you're really, should consider. Or just not have that entry down below, and you come out of the metro or whatever, and then people come up to come into the building. So that's one thing. And then in your facade, sometimes it's a little hard to understand why the terracotta pieces are where they are versus the glazing. Can you speak about that?
So I looked at creating increments of 4 feet, but I basically tried to make some rooms more open, depending on the program, and kind of create more solid panels for where, for instance, if there's an art room and I need a sink there, to have more of a solid panel.
But there's that big glazed area in the middle. I assume that's to sort of correspond to the bridge and to the atrium?
Yes, so the that main glass panel is basically showing that exterior, showing the atrium and exterior, yes.
Right, but in some places there are rooms to that also, right?
At some places there are classrooms to that.
Right, so maybe, where it's just a bridge, maybe it's glass, a lot of glass, and then maybe where it's classrooms, we continue the same terracotta language across. Let the interior sort of speak to the exterior, and then it's the arrangement of how that works. And then you have the corner that's all glass, and I don't know what's different on the interior that would make you do that. The far right corner?
So the far right corner, that is actually a glass stair. So it's showing
Okay.
It's showing the stair extruded up so that you can see the circulation from the exterior.
It's not in the model itself.
It is in the model, maybe not showing in this particular rendering for some reason, but
Okay.
it is there.
That probably would have been helpful. And maybe is it that is, again, maybe the language is that has its own sort of attitude that's different, more than just being glass. Again, it's the parts of this thing that are coming together that don't have that clarity right now. So.
And I think a lot of, so I had this main idea for these panels intersecting and kind of being a symbol of what's happening on the inside, but I think that it definitely could use some massaging, and there are so many different forms that are coming together in this building that that is something that I want to go back to and study more, is how these intersections actually happen.
I'd love to see you diagram the plan, because I think, and I can see it in your process, I think you're struggling with whether this is a box with a tail on it, or whether it's a big U shape that almost is sort of a snake-like piece that sort of wraps around and then is really pushed in from the top. And so I'd love to be curious about so what would you say it's a box, or is it a courtyard with a tail, or is it a...
So I think at the bottom floors, it's more of a courtyard with a tail, but once the tail kind of loses itself, then it more so is acting as a box. So I think it was a struggle, so where the circulation wants to be when the tail is actually in the building or on the floor plan, as opposed to how the circulation works without the tail.
So I go back to you've created for us a really amazing experience of interaction between all these different police, the community, and so it seems like it's about weaving these two communities together. And so the box with sort of the piece on the end of it feels very separated. And so I was wondering, are you going to describe that like this is the police station and it's sort of embedding itself into this community building, and are they interlocking in a way that where the actual program is sort of also informing the party?
And so, so the cop kiosk is actually underneath the stadium stair, and so I wanted it to be visible from Broad Street. And so that was my intent for placing it there. I don't think I ever...
is that where the community is coming in from?
What space did you say? What space?
I'm sorry, the cop kiosk is here. Yes. Yeah. And so it's visible from North Broad Street.
It just feels like that should be put very close to where the community is going to be, and so that those two populations start to become even more comfortable with each other and even more integrated with each other. And so I would just sort of challenge what would happen if you were to take the police station and place it on that corner and anchor it, and then allow them to just be more accepting of sort of the population coming in and entering their space versus kind of having them on the main arterial street. And I look at this rendering here, which I think is really beautiful, and you wonder what would happen if this was gone, right? If we just started to really pull away that in ways and open that up, because it really would then bleed out into the street and all of that would bleed in, and so that just feels like
the insert diagram didn't get followed through. Yeah.
I think a little bit of what's being got at right now. So I go back to where Eric first started, and I appreciate the metro, but based on how you describe this plaza and what its use is, I usually don't ponder these things all that much. I was really debating it during your presentation. Is the idea about seeking that if this is a place where rallies or protests might happen, or acts of public unity might happen, or things that are bringing the cultural collisions that you want this building to be a symbol of, and if this is going to be in the public forum, there's something that just strikes me as slightly not quite right about syncing that. And I get the metro being there, and I think there's ways to perhaps work that metro entrance maybe into your building. So you could have a two-height space inside of your building where the people are funneling through, and then they have a very nice experience of coming to the ground level. But I think this plaza that you've created, which is a great urban move across from the hotel, to sync that, I think it suppresses, because I think that rendering that we were just talking at, that kind of capsulizes it. You can imagine a moment when there's a lot of drama happening down in that plaza, but if you're at that street level, like the mezzanine rendering there, you're really not capturing all of that energy and excitement that might be happening in that space. And I think that also builds on other comments we've said about this, your main section here. It's like so beautiful. That should just be all completely open. So you're taking this outside experience, bringing it right into the building, without necessarily having, and I get there's functional reason why you might want to have that, but at least for the sake of your rendering, hide the bridge somewhere else or get the walkway in another location for the sake of the impact of the main drawing that's on your thesis. Like you really want to see this continue inside and outside, whatever drama is happening in here spilling in between the two. And then as you just talk about public spaces, and you begin to talk about how symbolism of spaces works into architecture, if you begin to bring that stuff below ground, there's a lot of symbolic loaded stuff about pushing that below ground that I think you open the door for that I don't think was perhaps intended, but it comes across that way as you begin to think about it more and more.
There is a lot of metro station entrances in cities. You feel a little bit like you're crawling them out from under a building, and I think there's a virtue in trying to make a more honorific kind of way in and out of the building. So probably that's something that could be improved upon. But I also think one of the things that is true of buildings, hopefully, is they tend to outlive their original programs. And in particular, buildings like this that have a lot of community uses, the arrangement of the inside of the building tends to change as the community needs change, right? And it strikes me that one other way you can think about, and by the way, there's some really beautiful drawings and beautiful ideas here, Antoinette, so compliments to you on that. And compliments to you for digging into Philly. I know you're passionate about Philly, and you have, from my experience with you, I know you have a lot of friends up there and stuff, but you know, it's great to sort of wrap your arms around a thesis project that is really important, right? So it makes me wonder, well, if you were thinking about this building a little bit differently and saying, well, what are the different kinds of things you would need? You would need big spaces, you would need small spaces, you know, because these programs will change over time. The comment that was made about having a basketball court there, or some big room that could be used for multi-purpose kind of things, whether it is ballet or basketball or community meetings or theater productions or, you know, community events of a certain sort, strikes me as something that you would want in here. And I think a simple way to do it would have been, instead of cutting the layers down that's been talked about down from grade, maybe just have a big room there that could be basketball, and then some days you take the hoops down and they could be something else, and the wall opens up and it can flow out into the courtyard. And then the rest of the building is kind of like a loft, you know, rooms and partitions and things can change as the needs of the community change. And so what would make me think a little bit differently would be whether I would really want this big space coming up through the middle of the building, all the way through it, that may in fact have some bearing on the flexibility of whether you could introduce different programs of different sizes here and there in the city, in the building. And so, you know, I think if you thought about it as something that had, you know, kind of one or two big spaces that could be used for a variety of things that relate to the city, and then everything else is more or less flexible, you know, because they'll change in 5 years or 10 years as the community changes. That might have yielded a different way of thinking about things that are fixed and things that aren't fixed, and how you organize that stuff relative to the public realm.
As part of that, I would just also encourage you to think about the sizes you're making, or of the spaces you're making. You've got this big kind of leaving atrium space, and these grand stairs coming down to a tiny little space where there's like a TV screen. And that's a really awkward space, actually, probably. So it gets back to the variety of spaces, but understanding, it looks to me, and I don't know, this is a little bit of, I guess I'm guessing, it seems like this was more of a, you're just putting the same floor slab, you know, multiplying it up and looking at the program on each piece instead of thinking about what spaces, the size of spaces that those functions would need. That's just how it comes across to me. Can you talk a little bit about the kind of fun art that's on the back of the building? Like what it seems the back?
One of the things that I wanted to incorporate is Philadelphia culture of murals. So taking this party wall that basically has the pochette of the mechanical rims on that side, and kind of show that this is synthesized into the culture of Philadelphia, as well as I incorporated an interior mural as well, so that people that are using these art classes may, again, feel as if this building belongs to them.
It feels like that should somehow wrap and integrate to the front. They're so opposite, and that has such light, and the inside has such light because of the graphic. That does speak to like joy and you know, possibility. That the front elevations or the rest of it just seems a little bit banal compared to that. And I feel like there's a way that you could maybe merge those things together so they're working together.
And at one point I was actually investigating ways in which people could take like the same terracotta modular panel, but not use terracotta, but some type of material in which people could actually take down the panels, paint them, and then put them back on. That's still something that I'm researching and finding out what material could actually take someone painting and take the exterior abuse on that panel. But that was definitely something that I thought about incorporating, is having it mostly on the soft
You can
facade.
certainly have art incorporated into those panels. I don't know if you're going to take them down. I don't know that there's really, there's reality of doing that often, but there's no reason you can't do that and have them kind of protected and sealed. But that's the essence and look that you want. And I think that, you know, Thesis, you're aiming for that and showing that.
I think there's opportunity for some of those mural spaces in this courtyard to, you've got these flat walls to play with, and if there's an idea that you're kind of taking panels down and putting them back. Maybe something's happening on the ground floor, that arcade of the tail piece of the building, whatever we're calling that. Maybe there's a way that it can be tiled and you can still have some visibility. It doesn't have to be all glass or all solid. You can play with that module a little bit. And then easier to reach, you would have to get a crane to get up there or something like that. But if it's more ground level, you know, it can be applied to the circles.
I like that idea, and I think the murals inside the building would actually be a public activity. And maybe they change over, maybe you have different groups come in and it is a big cultural thing.
Just a quick comment, jumping on the point of making decisions about the whole feel of the interior. You described the pillars as kind of neutral, as a kind of neutral element. I'm really not sure there's such thing as a neutral architectural element. And these pillars are really actually quite mighty, and they kind of dominate the space. They're kind of like Karnak or Luxor, and it's definitely something to think about. They're not going to disappear from the experience of the visitor, so how do you kind of incorporate that into the programmatic experience?
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think this comment relates to the one about the massive solidity of the columns. I know how hard you work to make the relationship to the divine Lorraine, and I think you worked it in a variety of ways, including the siting, creation of the outdoor space. But I think you also really grappled with this in the facade development. And now that I see this beautiful rendering of your contribution to the cityscape, it strikes me that the building is kind of unique and that it's significant in its transparency, because it's really, the mission, I think, is to reveal these different intersecting community populations. And that mural inside seems to me to be terribly significant. So I'm beginning to think that, in a sense, you've turned Philadelphia inside out. You know, you've taken this kind of solid red brick heritage of Philadelphia and you've stripped it down to this light, airy container, and you've taken the murals that people paint on the sides of the solid buildings and you put it inside. So I think at this point I would encourage you to strip the terracotta away. I know that there are environmental reasons for not creating a 100% glass facade, but you're almost there. And I feel like that nature of this element of the city as a beacon, as a transparent object, as a kind of inside-out building where you want to read it as being out on the street. All of the critics' comments about that transparency and movement from inside to outside, I think all those things are adding up to a building that's just a very kind of light container for this wonderful life that you've envisioned for us.
I think I originally...
Sorry, the thing about the solid columns, I think they refer to divine Lorraine because it's such a big solid pile. And again, it's kind of inside out. It's outside on divine Lorraine, it's inside in the building you're offering. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just going back to that comment about making it all glass. I think going back to that idea of honoring and respecting the existing context, I originally was thinking the building was definitely going to be brick, like 100% sure going to have brick. And then I started to think, well, this building is in context, however, it's providing a novel idea of what a new municipal or mixed-use building should be. So maybe it should be a conglomerate of both glass materials as well as masonry materials. So I don't know if I would explore the glass. Maybe I would try and go back and see if I could make it work in a way that was respectful. But that was my initial thought process.
You can respect the existing materials and the existing context without mimicking. Baltimore, I think, is an awful example. They just put red brick everywhere to be contextual. And it doesn't mean it's contextual, just to have it the same. So I'd say you could do it in glass and be contextual still and respect it. It's just how you articulate that. It's very difficult.
The inside of the building is so happy in a way, you really rendered it with so much color and life, and then sort of said, okay, well the only place that I'm going to put color and life on the outside is on the back of the building. And so there's things like, you know, some of the library that David Adjay has done in I mean, that just things like that, that it could have some color, it could have some life in a still an understated way that's kept within a very strict formwork, but you allow color. I mean, look at some of Suzanne's amazing work. So I mean, there's really ways that I could bring that life to the outside facade too.
I think that it's a big challenge to give all the responsibility to one building. The building will provide unity to a conflict area, to a conflict city, to a culture, whatever. So, and for me, you can do that by opening it more to the outside and designing more the outside than the inside. Because even the building is glass and seems light and open, it's very incoherent. It's kind of a closing at this atrium in the middle, but it's quite incoherent. So the building was more incoherent and was engaging the outside, the streets and the people, then you can bring everyone together. And I would spend more time designing the outside than the building itself. I know that for activities you have to do a building, and that's one of the problems. You take big challenges and then you have to focus on a building. But the outdoor, the connection to the city and all the streets, and it's very important.
This is a Do I get it? Yes. What an interesting, beautiful project. And what a challenging, in fact, and yet realistic conceptual basis of this. And the quality that comes to my mind, that came to my mind as soon as I saw these drawings, is appropriate. And this is a quality that is getting more and more scarce in the panorama of architecture. This is an appropriate design. And if I see that perspective, I see, oh, maybe it's already there. It's real. It's not yet. Let's build it. And I don't feel like that in most of the projects that I see around in the academic world. I say, oh, interesting, challenging. Would you actually build it? Oh, no, of course not. I would like to see it done. And I find it so rich from so many points of view. For instance, this in my mind is an example of what I sometimes say. Sometimes you do good urban design just with a building. And the idea that you make a strange configuration of the plan is because you do a very interesting, regular, understanding, enjoyable geometry of the public realm. And I find the building living very well with the surrounding that, thank you, you actually drew in your elevations. It fits, and yet it has the aspect of a public building. So you know that it's not the normal residential building, something that is sort of attractive, but without imposing in a way. And somehow I find interesting the configuration of the plan, and at the same time not banal. But it works, at least, you know, seen from far. Maybe there are a few flaws, I don't know. I should look at it from close. But it gives the idea, yes, that there are no major boo-boos, which is, you know.
A technical term.
Yes, the boo-boo is something that says, where is this column? How is this going to stand up? Something like that. Or how do you enter here and there is no door or something like that. There are a lot, as you know. So in a way, this multiplicity of elements, inside, outside, something that can be ambiguous enough to be read as one, but also as two and many, it's kind of exciting and it's attractive, and I find it very interesting in a way. So, well, I thought of many qualities. Of course, in the meantime, I forgot. I do like the mix of materials. Because in a way, you want to do things that belong to the place, that talk about the place, at the same time, not in a stupid way. I find it attractive, stimulating, and yet not that kind of noisy thing. And I can feel people going there and using it. And just to add one thing, Mark, I don't think that buildings can really include all the possible programs. So the idea of having a basket court here, really? I mean,
Yes. No, a multi-purpose room where you could play basketball.
Oh, inside.
Is a very good thing.
Okay, that I don't know. I thought that you meant to have like a soccer court instead of
On the roof.
The roof would be good, but then you have the hole there, and I think it's kind of. I don't know if you can use that as a goal, but I doubt it. Anyways, congratulations.
Just a quick
Sometimes students think of wall sections as kind of a more technical drawing, but I think in your case, and I think as I recall when I did thesis, it was mandatory, and I think that could have been a very poetic development of your facade that probably would have informed the making of a curtain wall, the glass. I could see a scenario where you have these panels, but perhaps there's a digital imprint of a mural in Philadelphia or some kind of art that washes those solid panels. So.
Antoinette approached this thesis with a thoughtfulness and depth that was commendable. From researching and interviewing police officers in Philadelphia to a deep dive into the history of the Divine Lorraine, she came prepared to tackle this incredibly challenging topic of cultural conflict. So I think she should be congratulated on trying to see how there could be architectural and spatial solutions to this problem that exists in our country. And thank you for bringing this discussion to us and allowing us to sort of debate some of these topics. And congratulations.
Thank you.